and it was about the React hook form. So it's a separate hook form that is not inbuilt in React, but it's developed or managed by another company. So we have this React hook form. So the React hook form is used to validate the React, maybe the form inputs. And if you go to this official documentation, which is React hook form.com, you get this message here, which is performant, flexible, and extensible forms with ease to use what? Validation. So these are the demo of how you want to use the full React hook form. And I want to go to the get started. And how do you use this React hook form? It is just a single, it takes only one single command, and you are ready to do what? To roll. How do we do this? So we just install what? The React hook form. The next is now you have two parts, whether you are working with JavaScript or whether with TypeScript. So it's all about you to copy the one you are okay with, or the one framework you are using, either the JavaScript or TypeScript. So for the TypeScript, so at the top level of your component, you want to import what? The React hook form. So the React hook form gives you two named component that you get from that React hook form. So you have the use form and a submit andra. So submit andra is a type from this React hook form, because if you visit the React hook form from registry, so the npm registry, this one, if I open this and check, it's already TypeScript declared. So you won't be installing what types for React because already the TypeScript declaration has been made for this React hook form. So it's built in with performance. It embraces the native what? HTML form validation, and it's out of the box integration with any UI library. It's just a small size and no dependencies. And it also supports other libraries like the app, the Zod validator, the AGV, the Superstruct, the Joy, and other. But in most cases, I don't see essence of going beyond of having a React hook form to validate your own form, and also injecting resolver of maybe the app or sound validation on top of that. Use form itself does that. So how do you use it? You import the use form, and remember you need to add what? The submit and which is the type declaration for React hook form. Then on your app, you destructure now whatever is coming from this use form function. So this use form, it has 3 or 4 or 5 components that can be destructured from. So it has a register function. So the purpose of the register function, I don't know whether they have that clear documentation. We can go to the official documentation and see whether they have explained. So once you do this, this is just a type alliance for your inputs. We say now when working with forms, when doing interfaces, so there is interfaces and forms. So not forms, but interfaces with types alliance. So when mostly dealing with form, you find us using type alliance to type a what? Inputs. But if you are getting data from the backend, we are using interface to guard that data that is coming from the backend, which is now the JSON data, which now you can type with a what? An interface. But if you are sending data to the backend, you use the type to type a what? Our form or the function that is sending that data. So these are just a simple way you can use. So once you destructure the register function, the undo submit, we have a watch function and a form state. So the form state checks some errors and the rest, and it console those errors in your inputs. So if you go over to where so we can start with the register field. So This register field is what we have been instruction from this use form. So this use form register field, it has this one of the key concepts in React hook form is to register what? Your component into the hook. So this will make its values available for both validation and what? Summation. So if you destructure that and get this register from use form, you'll be able now to use, like we'll be spreading out that register and giving the name of that input, like first name. That is be the name will be in this register form, which is making sure your variable is available for both form validation and what? Summation. So the next thing is how to apply those validation. So while applying this validation, there are various rules that are supported in that validation. The first one is what? Required. The second one is what? If you remember from the zoned validation from the backend, the same validation. We are checking whether that form input is required and min length and max length, min length and max length, some pattern, especially when working with the what? Email. You want to check some pattern and also validate things like that. Once you do that, we have another way of maybe you can integrate now an existing form by just doing this, what we call path and use form. So use this path to make sure you can integrate with existing form, but we won't be going that direction. We'll be just using React hook form directly to validate our form. So let's try and see how we can have a simple demo of how we can use this React hook form to validate our form. So in our project folder, I want to create a new folder for our project. So minimize this. In our project here, we want to have a folder for React hook form. React hook form demo. Then I can open this with terminal and do the instantiating or scaffolding a React project. So npm create void. So to take the name of my folder name, then is a React TypeScript. No, then install the dependencies and start the server. So let's wait for the React project to spin up and install the necessary dependencies. Yeah, once that is done, we can open this with VS Code. And start implementing the React hook form. And the first thing we said is to install it, the React hook form. And it's always a good thing to confirm from the registry, the NPM registry, whether you need what? The type declaration. So if you see here some DS, which is declaration system or declaration or DT declaration TypeScript, you may want to install what types for that. But since React form is natively made out of using the TypeScript, we won't install those types, but we will just be using them from the React library, the React hook library. So I can just use this or any to install that. So I just copy the React hook form library, come into my application, And let me zoom out a little bit. Then in our terminal, we want to install that. So pnpm and React hook form. These are our very first third-party library we are installing in our application. If you check on our application now, instead of having the two libraries that we usually come, the React and React DOM, we have now an extra library called React what? Hook form, which is now version 7.6, and it is a normal dependencies because this will go to production. So once that is done, I think our project is running on port 5173. So let's open on the browser. Yeah, so this is our project, and I want to put it side by side with our project, which is this one. Then we can start doing our implementation. So I just use the app.tsx file. I don't want to create more components for now, but we just want to reuse what we have in this. So just a minute. I have disabled that. Then we can continue. So in our app.tsx, we need to remove this, whatever is there. Then we remove this useState. We won't be using it. And also maybe whatever you're not using, just make sure you remove from your app. Then the first thing we said on the browser or the React hook form is to import what? To import the use form and the submit what? Handler. So how can we do that? So we import this named export, which is use form, and kindly remember to check the naming convention these libraries use. They use camel case in most cases. So it's use form, then because the other one is a type, that is why it is having a sub what we call the Pascal naming convention. So submit Andra. So you should be careful when importing this library. Know when to import using the camel case, know when to import using what? The Pascal case. So you have the two, these are coming from where? From React hook form. So React hook form library, this one. Since this is a type, if you see this should be now type submit Andra. That is how it should be because it's like an interface, which is now having this Pascal naming convention, but the function itself, it's in camel case. So once we do that, so inside our function, which is now our app, that is where I want now to destructure whatever the this one, whatever the use form give us, which is now the const. We destructure whatever that use form is giving us. So which is coming from where? The use form function now. So this use form give us the register function, which is saying it just gives you and make your values to be available for form validation and submission. Then the next thing that use form give us is handle submit. So it's just a function that enables us to do what? To submit that form we are using. Then the next thing it's the reset function. So can we remember the function, the work of this reset? So it's just to reset your form input whenever you are click what? Submit. Then another thing that this form as is something we call form state. So this form state, it's an object also. So form a state, and this form state, it's an object, and we want to return just the errors where are being registered by this register function. So once we destructure these three that way, so they should not be function that way, just import the register, the under submit, reset, and form what? Errors. So the rest is now to use whatever now this is giving us. So in my app, I want to have something here. Instead of returning this fragment, I want to return a div, and this div will have something, another div and another div. Maybe we can have another div for handler. Then below that div, I want to have now the form component or the form element, which comes from HTML element. On this div, which is the ender, I can have maybe an H3 to indicate what we are building, which is maybe the React hook form. So this should be the whatever being displayed here. Are we getting that? Let's see. Yeah, so we have this React hook form. Then the next thing is now maybe to give some styling of the parent div. We can give it some styles, and which styles maybe padding, background, and border radius. So let me have those styling there. So we have the padding, we have the background, and what? So this is whatever we are having here. Then the next thing is just the H3. So this H3, we can also have some styling for it. So this div, we want to give it this styling. Then same case with our H3, whatever we have here. So this form or the H1, we can give it a text color of white, which it can be the same the way it is. So on this form, we want to remove this action and have our input here. So these inputs, I want to divide them into 3 divs. So I want to have the first div, a second div, and a third div. Then inside those div, I want now to have the input what? Element. So I want to have an input element. Same case with this, I want to have an input what? Element. Then on the third div, I want also to have our input what? Element. We don't need the ID and the name, so we only need to the type of that input, which is either a text or what, number or password. Once we have that, maybe what else do we need? A button to submit, right? In this form. So just below the third div here, I can have a button there. So this button is maybe submit form. And we can have it that way. So we have these 3. Then this div, we can have some styling, which is maybe a margin bottom to have the spaces between here. So let's have those margin in this div that is holding the first input, the second input, and the third input. So we can have a margin bottom of 20 pixels. So this div, no, this one, we want to have a style of margin bottom, which is 20 pixels. So you'll find it having pushing some content below there. Same case with the other div. So copy this on this div. Same case, we want to have that space below there. And the same case in this div, we want to have that margin bottom. So the next thing is just maybe to give this input label so that we can be able to see, to know this is the input for first name, this is the input for what? Last name and maybe email. And how can we do that? So in input, we have an attribute called what? Place order. So the place order gives you what? the message to display in that what. So this can be a placeholder for the first name. So whenever you see this now, you'll be knowing this is a first name what? Input. Same case with the second one, can be the surname. So inside the input, you want to have a placeholder, then this can be the last name. So the last name can be the family name. So we can have that emoji and then the last name there. So whenever now I start typing, the placeholder goes away. But if you haven't typed anything, it will just show you this is the first name or the last name what? Input. Then the other thing is maybe this can be email. So a placeholder for what? Email. That way we can have maybe an emoji to do that. So to have that uniformity that way. So you have the first name, last name, and email. Then the next thing now, we can style these inputs just to make them as beautiful as possible. So inside this input, we can have the style class. So this style, we want to pass some styling. And which styling can we pass here? So maybe we can have a padding to make sure the text and the input border has some good spacing. So we can have padding and the padding of maybe 12 pixels that way. So you get that good, or maybe make it 8 to be not that big that way. Then another thing, we can have a border radius. So the border radius. Border radius of 2 pixels width, 2 pixels width. Then the next thing should be a solid border radius and a what? Which color? We can have it as maybe E9, EC, EF to be of this color there. Then do we need anything else? Oh, this should not be the border radius. This should be border alone, so that you can have that border all going through. If you want to be a different color, you can just choose from the color palette, and you get that color there. Then of course I was to put that border radius. So this border radius to be maybe 10 pixels or 8, so 10 pixels. So to have that corners there, instead of sharp corners, we have that rounded form inputs. So I want to do the same on both inputs. So I can just copy the styles, add them on the second input, which is this one there, and have the same styling, and same case with this, the third input, which is the email address that way. And with that now, you have a good form that we can work along and now use the React hook form to validate what we have here. So also the button, we can give it some styling, which is this button. We can give it some styling here. So this style will be maybe width, padding, border, and border radius, something like this. Then remember when inputting, if this is the email address, the type should be what? Email, not text. Then if you are typing a text, last name should be a text, then this should be a text. So that is done for our form. So we can use now the React hook form to do our form what? Validation and submitting that data. So in this form, we will be listening to something. So that something is on what? Submit event. And that submit event can call what? A function. So where are we getting that function? We have this now under submit from where? From use form. So you can pass that under submit here now. And that under submit is a function. So you open the curly braces that way, and you can pass what? Whatever you want to submit, which is just essentially just calling another function. So we will be having a function to do that. So const submit that form. So we can just do that submit form, which is an arrow function. So this arrow function, which is this one. So this submit function now, the one will be now doing the actual submission of, or the code now to do the form submission, or now calling the, maybe the bucket where you are sending that data. So this submit form is the one now you are supposed to pass on this under submit function that is coming from where? The use form hook. So this is what we should pass here now. Submit what? Form. So whenever now you'll be on submit, when we click this submit form button, we'll be calling the under submit from use form, and this under submit will handle our form submission, which is this function that we want to submit that data. And the next thing now in this documentation was this, the register what? Where is that? The register concept. This register field. So one of the key concepts talked about is the register. It makes your variable to, or the value to be available for both words. So what do you do? So in that form where you have the input, you open the curly braces and the password, this register, the one we have instruction. So you like spread, it's an array. So you spread, then you add a key, which is the first name. So this input in the register function that is coming from the use form, it gets this first name in that register, and you can use now the error or any other function in that form state to do validation of this input. So we'll do this in our input. Same case, if you have another input, which is this, like maybe a select option, we can do the register, then we give it a name like what? This one. So how can we do this in our form? So in our form, we said once you inside that input, you open another now JSX. So on that JSX, you spread what? The register what? Function that is coming from where? From use form, this one. So that is what we need to pass in this, what we call the register. So this register is a function. So you need to pass the open curly braces. Then this register expects what? A name. So it's just a name that you want to give this input. For this case, our first input is for what? The first name. So we can give it that name, which is what? First name. Then we can do the rest of now validation. So once you give that, then you have comma here. You can now validate, or the validation that we have. And if you check on this documentation, we can do what? The required, the mini, the max, the minim length, the max length, pattern, and what? The validate. So how can we use them? So in this register, we spread, we give it the first name. Then after that, we can open the comma. Then we open those now validation patterns. So we open another curly braces, then call the required what? Option. So this required can be true. So to make sure that input should be added something when submitting what? That form. So if I come back in my submit form, we are having an issue. So let me just refresh. Where are we getting that issue from? Let's see. Excuse me. So the issue is coming from here, saying we should not have this comma. Oh yeah, so I get it. So whatever is happening, it should not be outside. This required should be inside the, after giving what? The value. If you check this register, it's give you the name and some what? Options. So this option is what we should pass. So after the register name, we can have that comma, then the first option can be now the what? The required validation, which is true. So to make sure that form input is required. So if you try to submit, you'll be seeing something highlighting like this form or this input is required, but we'll have a custom component or input or p tag to showcase that. So we can do a required, then after the first, which is required, we can have another validation, which is what? Maybe a mini length. So inside there, we can have the mini. If you check, we have that intelligence to pass the mini length to be what? So this mini length is an object. So the mini length now expect what? A value and a what? So which is a number. Like we want to make sure the value or the character that this first input or the first name should have a minimum of how many characters? 2. If you do not have that, you can pass what? The message. So the message can be what? First name should have what? At least what? First name must have at least 2 characters. So those are the 2 things maybe I want to validate in this form. And yeah, that is it. And the next thing is now maybe to make sure we type our use form. Remember this function, it doesn't know the props. So you see the props like the typing. It doesn't know, it is typing it with any what? Data type that we don't want. So how can we do that? So instead of defining an interface, we can define a what? A type. So this type can be the form values, can give it that name. Then on form values, we want to have the 3 inputs, which is the first name of data type what? The first name is of data type what? String. Then the last name should be of data type what? String. Then the third one is what? The email. So email should be what? A string also. So with that now, we can type our use form, this one, with the what? With this type to make sure it's aware of the input we are passing. So how do we type this function? So you open the greater than and less than symbols. Then you pass that form value type there. So with that now, the use form will be able to understand what you are passing here. So if you check on this intelligence, it will be checking on the first name, last name, or what? The email. So once that is done, then same case on submit, remember it's a function and it's yet to be typed. So it is returning something void. But this function expects some data, which is coming from where? Our form. So whatever you should pass here is data, but remember when without using the form, React hook form, we would pass a what? Event. And we type with React HTML element, which is now was a lot of work. So it just pass the data that is coming from where? The form. So the form returns a data and that data should be passed now in this submit function. So this data is of data type any. How can we type that data? Remember this type submit handler. So we can type our function with that. So this function we can type it that way, call the submit handler function, and type it with what? The form values, this one, the same case here. So we type it with those form values there. And with that, the issue of now this data giving us, instead of any data type, it's aware of the what? The data that you are passing in what? In this form, with these form values there. So that is done. Then we want to do the same case with the other inputs. So we want to register each input. So after that, open the curly braces, call the register what? Function. So this register function, we want to give that input a name. So this should be a what? So if you check here now, we have the inheritance. This is the power of typing your use form and also your function before even implementing, so that you can be able to get what? This inheritance of, like, the register function knows that your form value should be either an email, first name, or what? The last name. So this should be the last name there. Then after that, we want to pass now the options, which is now we can open this, then the required to be true. Then the next can be what? The mini length also. So the mini length it's an object, so we need to open that so that we can pass the value, which is 2 also. And if we do not have that 2, we want to pass a message like what? First name, our last name should be what? This one. So the last name should be at least 2 characters. So we have this last name. So same case for what? The email, which is the last our input here. So you open the curly braces, spread the register function, open the function, pass the name. So automatically it gets that inheritance because we already typed our use form. So the use form, then comma, this should be what? Which validation? We can do on email. So we can do the first to be what? The required. So we need to open the curly braces that way. So this should be required to be what? True. Then the next thing we can do is what? What else can we validate on email? The pattern. Email has a pattern that we can follow. So we can also validate that. So after that, we can have the second, which is pattern. If you check, it has this pattern option there. And this pattern is the regex pattern. So we can open the curly braces and pass that pattern there, which is now the values. You can get it from somewhere, the pattern you need to validate. So something like this. So the pattern or the value we want to check is this. If that pattern does not meet, you want to display a message saying what? What should you pass? Please enter what? A valid email. That one. So with that, now we have already done some validation on our form. The next thing is to use this form state to display our errors. So how can we do that? So just below the form input, this one, we can do something, which is now to open an empty JSX syntax there to display this dynamic value, which is the form errors. How can we do that? So on the first input, we can call these errors, the one we are getting here. So the errors, remember those errors are being registered by this register function, and that errors are specifically, or they are uniquely identified by the name that we are passing on that what? Register function. If it's errors for the first name, it is given this name. If it's errors for the class name, they are uniquely identified by the name we are passing in this register function that we are spreading. So outside the form input, you open the curly braces, then you can call what? The errors what? Function, or the error object, which is now the errors object. Once you call it, you want to get the actual error of the first what? Remember, with the help of typing, we are able to get the what? The errors of that specific what? Input, which is the first name. This one, our first name. And if we have an error, remember, we want to display this JSX part if we have those errors. So we can use the ampersand to display whatever we have here, which is like an if statement. So without the else part. We want only to display when these errors we have for what? For the first name. So what we do, we want to display something. So we can open the parentheses and then have a p tag. So this p tag can now display what? That error there. How can we do that? So we can just call open the curly braces, which is the JSX syntax also, and password, the errors objects, then call the actual error of that what? The first name that way, which is now not just the first name, but also the what? If we go another dot, we can display what? The actual message of that error that is in this error what? Object. So we can use now the message. So with that now, if we try to submit this form, remember you already have this function and we are passing that data here. So we can just console log that data here. Console.log that data, or maybe do an alert of that data is being passed on this submit under. So the form, the input, the first input, you already have this JSX code that is being displayed only when we have errors in the first what? Name. So if we try now to do some submission even without adding something, the first input is not displaying something because it needs some what? Let's try to refresh and see whether we should get that display. So submit, we are not seeing something. Maybe we can give this a styling of to show data like maybe the color to be red. Wait, to see whether we can get that display somewhere. So the color of red, if we try to submit, we are still not getting this, but if we, yeah, we are getting that form validation. So if you try to start typing, it will automatically give you what? The text. The first name should what? So the first input, which is the required, we are not doing this because the required, we are passing a generic type or generic value, which is what? True, of which we can pass a message instead of just passing what? We want to be, instead of just having that message true, we can pass what? A message. And how can we pass that message? So we remove the true keyword, then have what? A message like first name is what? Required, instead of that generic required thing. If we do that now, and if we try to submit, we are getting now first name is what? Required, because we are doing a real-time what? Validation. We are checking whether the first name is required. If this is required, then if we start typing, if we add one letter, that means the first rule was true and it passes because we have something in input. But we have another rule that we are validating, which is what? The mean length to be what? 2 values. So if I now add 2 values there, the error goes away. Then we can now go ahead to do what? So that is what we are doing, the real-time validation of that form. Yes, this value can be maybe 3. So that's anytime you submit this form, already saying the form, the first name is what? required. So if I try typing, the first validation is done, which is checking whether that form has something. But we don't want to check not just something. We want to make sure the min length is what? 3 values. Once you surpass the 3 values, the errors goes away and you can be able to submit that form. So you want to do the same with other form inputs. So just below that, maybe we can have margin. So let me have this margin of this color here, this styling. So we want it to be, I'm having an issue. So let's see where the error could be. Yeah. So anytime we don't have this, we have this form first name is required. If we type, the first name must be what? 2 characters or 3 characters, depending on what you have passed here. So with that now, we can copy this, the same JSX, and place it on the second input and change the errors to be the last what? Name. Then the errors we should display is for the what? Last name. Then we can check instead of 2 characters can be 3 characters to make sure we cover any name. Like who has a name with less than 2 characters? We have such people. Or at least I know people with 3 letters. And you already have one in the code. So we can make sure we have that. Then same case, we want to have on the email. So the email, after that input, we want to have that object there. Then once we have that object, not this one, but we want to have the error object display here. This should now be email. And the error we should display is for the email. With that now, we have our form. So this form now, it's already validated. So if we try to submit without anything, we just get that issue of error. So if we try to add something with less than 2, it gives you the second validation. Then if we add the land what, to give you what, the error will go away. So we haven't submitted, checked on this. So let's check what issues we have with the second name or the last name. So in this, we have this. This should be outside, which is this one, last name, and display that issue. So this required, yeah, this should be the message we should display there. Last name should be what? Last name is required. The same case with email, where you have the required to be true. You want to make sure its email is what? Required. With that now, if we come back in our code and refresh this, then if we try to submit, all the validation start checking. So if we add something there, we need at least 2 characters or the 3 characters. So if we surpass the 3 characters, the validation goes away. It returns a true. Then the same case with the second name and the email. So yes, we are typing something. So like the email is required. So if we start typing, the error changes now to be what? Please valid what? Email. And a valid email should have what? At what? Maybe something.com. If you want that now, the issue goes away. And you are able now to submit what? Your form. So this is what we'll be using. And now whenever you submit this, we can check. We can maybe check whatever is being submitted here with this console log, the data that is being coming in this. So if we inspect and check on the console log and submit this, we are getting what? The object now that should be sent to what? to the bucket, which is maybe the email, the first name, and what? The last name. So that is how it's done with React form. Maybe the next thing is to reset this form. Remember, whenever you submit, you want to leave the form what? Empty. Remember the use form as that what? A reset what? Function. So we can use it after we console log. We can call what? The reset what? Function. That way. Then if that is now, if we try to submit again, so add this, and this, and this. So if we submit, this should be a valid email. So at something.com. Then if we submit, the form is what? Done a reset. Like after we submitting, we want to delete everything in this. So if we want not to use submit or the use form, we could have a use state to store this value of the first input, have a what? A use state to store what? The second value, and a what? Another use state to store what? Then we would have manual validation processes. So if you check on this README I have on that project, the one I'm referring from. So the form is whatever you have been doing. You can pass this to check the email validity. Then you console log that data. Then the differences of the React hook form and the native way of form validation. So the React hook form reduces some minimal read of your component, but if you are having the use state to track your changes, you will find like, because it's a variable, not variable, but a state, and we said a state makes your component to re-render. So if anytime you are typing a letter, the keystroke, you will find that component is re-rendering because of the change of that what? State of that use state. So it is a built-in what? Validation. So they are out of the box. Then in the use state, you will have to do the manual validation, checking whether you have some trim, whether it's required, and the rest. But in the hook form, you just call those validation projects. Then easy error handling. You have seen now you have done that, just displaying that error with the error form state. Then if it was normal native way, we'd have a complex error state management. We'd have some use state with error, maybe variables and the rest. So it has a better performance and can this React hook form can be thrown with many inputs. Then it has a less boilerplate and a lot of use state. Remember this one, the use state core, because that is where you want to store each what? Value. And you cannot store first name and last name in the same use state variable. You may need each input to have its own or independent what? Use state. And that is it. So if you want to validate an email, so you may want to pass the required, then the password is required. The minimum length can be 6, then the password can be this. So that's whatever we are doing. So that is it. And we will be using form, the React hook form in any of our React projects that we'll be using for easy what? Form validation. Because of with now less than maybe how many lines of code? 100 lines of code. We already have a form and we already validated that form and it's ready to submit. So in the submit function is where now you do the try catch maybe and call what? Your actions or the API to submit that data to backend. That is where it would happen here.